Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order, and we will move to agenda item number 9, which is discuss and take action on a request for waiver of TCO Rule 217.1, minimum standards for enrollment, initial licensure. Director Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, you have in your packet information on a Class B waiver that has been sent to us from the Houston Fire Department Arson Bureau. Upon reviewing that and having reports made back to me on that, we found that it did meet qualifications for a waiver. After reviewing and making some phone calls and some investigation into it, it was my decision to move it forward to y'all for your consideration for the waiver.
Okay, I have Mr. Gonzalez signed up to address the commission on this, if you'd like to come to the microphone. And I have Jose Trevino. Please step to the microphone, introduce yourself, and address the commission.
Good morning. My name is Jesus Gonzalez. I'm an engineer operator with the Houston Fire Department. Thank you for this opportunity, first of all, for letting me come up here and speak. What we're talking about is one of the worst days of my life. I'm lucky to have my chief here because he does not have to be here to represent me, and so I'm definitely blessed to have this opportunity. I wrote 2 letters, that way I don't ramble on and waste y'all's time because I'm a fireman. So I'm here hopes that I will be given the honor to become a police officer through the Houston Fire Department Arson Division. This will allow me to continue the job that I'm passionate about. The passion will continue to allow me to tirelessly investigate those who commit arson instead of participating in extinguishing the fire as I do right now. I have 17 years of experience as a firefighter, with 13 of those years with the Houston Fire Department. I completed almost 5 years of service for my community with the Spring Volunteer Fire Department as a volunteer firefighter. The fire department allowed me to be a junior firefighter at the age of 16, which permitted me to fulfill my dream of giving back to the community where I grew up, and my dad was also a captain there. During my time with the Houston Fire Department, I opted to work at some of the busiest firehouses in the city. During that time, I was awarded a Medal of Valor in 2008 for a high-rise building fire that made national news that I wear proudly on my chest. In 2012, I was promoted to engineer operator. I was tied for the highest grade on that. I made 100 on that. For that promotion test, out of around 800 firefighters that sat for the test. After serving my current position for 2 years, I became eligible to sit for the arson investigator promotional test. Again, I scored the highest raw score on the test out of at least 80 firefighters that sat for the test. I recently received a letter of recognition from the Houston Citizen for great customer service. And that really never happens in the city of Houston. So I was actually honored to have that. I mentioned this to reflect how dedicated I am to the Houston Fire Department and my community. I strive to better my career in hopes to join one of the greatest arson bureaus in the country. The hard work and commitment I will bring to the bureau as an arson investigator will be an asset to the community, and I will diligently serve and protect. I'm asking to please be granted a waiver to become a Texas police officer so that I can continue to fulfill the Houston Fire Department mission on saving lives, protecting property, and serving our community with compassion, courage, and commitment. I understand, if granted this waiver, that I will be opting the mission of the Houston Police Department of enhancing the quality of life for the citizens of Houston by working with the public to enforce the law, prevent crime, and preserve peace and provide a safe environment for all. One of the things that I also submitted to the chief was I'm on a duty crew with the Aldine Fire Department. I've been there for almost 8 years, and I had a letter of recommendation from the fire chief to be a police officer to the state of Texas. I would have had a whole bunch of more, but I'm really embarrassed to talk about this to a lot of my coworkers. But I was able to provide him with my EPEs, which are employee performance evaluations that show that I do my job with pride. Sorry, this is tough for me. I got a letter, or I wrote another letter regarding the incident of why I'm needing this Class B waiver. And I'll share it with you, okay? On August 8, 2007, I took my motorcycle, which was one of the worst purchases I've ever purchased in my life, out for a short ride close to my house after making some repairs on it because I wrecked it twice, and I haven't rode it for 6 months, and I was trying to get it ready to sell. I was stopped at a red light at 1960 and Briar Creek Boulevard, and it was turned green. I proceeded through the light. Approximately a quarter mile after going through the light, I heard a siren behind me. I immediately pulled over to the right of the shoulder and turned off my motorcycle off. The police officer approached me and cuffed me for evading arrest. I was escorted to jail at that time. December 19, 2007, the prosecutor offered me a deal through my attorney. The deal was deferred adjudication for a Class B misdemeanor for reckless driving in accordance with Section 5 of Article 4212 of the Texas Code of Criminal Procedures. I was fined $200 and had to serve 6 months probation. I only served 4 months probation due to Judge Wilkinson giving me early dismissal on the case on April 1st, 2008. At the time the prosecutor offer was made, I was in jeopardy of losing my job that I had dreamed since I was a child. The Houston Fire Department requires its members to resolve a case in 180 days or face termination. The department enforces immediately termination for any felony charges, so my lawyer advised me to take the lesser charge of a Class B misdemeanor to keep my job. My wishes were to go to trial to plead my case, but that would have exceeded the 180 days. My counsel led me to believe that accepting this offer would dismiss the charges, and after the time, nothing would appear on my record. This had not turned out to be the case, and he never explained to me the long-term effects this would have on my life. The whole situation, I was distraught with the entire situation and quickly wanted to resolve it so that I could continue to serve my community as a firefighter. I have utmost respect for law enforcement, as I have worked side by side with them on many emergency scenes throughout my career, and even cutting a few of them out of a couple patrol cars. Several members of my family, are police officers, including my wife. She's with the Houston Police Department. I mention this because I have the utmost respect for them, and I would never want to defy their cause. If time would allow me to go back, I would have never took this. I would have took this to trial because evidence shows I didn't evade arrest, and I would never do that. That's pretty much what I wrote, and if y'all have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Okay, questions from the commission?
Do you have any comments anymore?
Well, I'm gonna ask the chief. I want to hear from the chief.
How are you? My name is Jose Trevino. I'm the acting deputy chief of the Houston Arson Bureau. I was asked to be here today to represent or to come down here and vouch for, attest to the character of Mr. Gonzalez. I really wasn't too familiar with Mr. Gonzalez until maybe a few months ago. This process started. I was able to have a couple of discussions with him. I reviewed his EPEs, the letters of recommendation that he submitted, and talking to him and reviewing what his other officers in the past 5 years, I think I read, have said. I think he'd be an asset to the department. This is really proactive for the arson division because he's the next in line for promotion into the arson division. So we're trying to get this taken care of. If we can get the waiver granted when the eligibility, when there is an opening, then he'd be the next investigator to be promoted. So I'm here to speak on his behalf. I think we'd be an asset to our division.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Director, anything, any comments?
Other than, we completely reviewed this, and I want you to rest assured, any waiver that comes to you is looked at very closely. Y'all have made that very clear. You don't want things coming to you that have much question to them. I was very impressed with this young man's willingness to stand up and face what he had done. Everything about this spoke of him being an asset, a potential asset for his agency. Also, that it is, since it is a Class B misdemeanor, in December of 17, he will be open to do this even without this waiver. So we're talking about a waiver of about a year and a half. But it was my recommendation, bringing it to you, that I felt like he was a viable candidate.
Okay, thank you. Pleasure of the commission.
Mr. Chair, with the vision that the motorcycle may have been on one wheel when the light turned green, I would make the motion in favor of granting the waiver. Second.
Motion and a second. Other discussion or questions?
One question.
Commissioner?
Mr. Vickers, we don't have a copy of the original offense report.
Apparently, it's been very difficult to get, because we were not able to get our hands on it, and in the initial application, they had trouble getting their hands on the initial incident report. So I had to move forward with everything else without it. We had some difficulty getting.
What agency was that?
Commissioner Pennington, also, that difficulty has to do with the court order on page 72.
And what agency was that made the arrest?
Harris County Sheriff's Office. I also forgot to mention that I also was granted for this to be, this case to be sealed by the judge. So this case has been sealed through the court.
We see that paperwork.
Oh, okay, just wanted, and another thing I never said is I've never, ever been in trouble with the law. This is the only thing I've ever had happen to me.
Commissioner Hester.
Mr. Gonzalez, and this is for both of you and Chief Hernandez, you do understand that if you're granted this waiver is only good for this agency for the period of time?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Go be a hero.
Yes, sir, I
All
will.
right.
Thank you for your time.
You will. We are going to move to agenda item number 10, which is take action on proceedings for revocation, suspension, and other disciplinary actions. Mr. Beecham.
Commissioners, the first items for your consideration of the disciplinary section are your default suspension orders. These are licensees who had received petition from the executive director. The executive director sought suspension of these licensees' licenses for a period of 10 years for criminal offenses. The executive director recommends the acceptance of the default suspension orders for the following: Jose Carrizales, Amanda Clayton, Larry Davis, Roman Gonzalez, Eric Jimenez, Roy Shepard, Jake Soye, Raul Trejo, and Nicholas Walther.
Thank you. Commissioner.
I move that the commission accept and adopt the recommendations of the executive director to enter a default final order as authorized under the provisions of 37 Texas Administrative Code 223.3, as required under the provisions of the Texas Occupations Code 1701, Section 1701.501, to suspend the license of Jose Carrizales, Amanda Clayton, Larry Davis, Roman Gonzalez, Eric Jimenez, Roy Shepard, Jake Soye, Raul Trejo, and Nicholas Walther.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Beecham.
Next, commissioners, are the agreed suspension waivers. These are in response to the executive director's petition to licensees who have committed criminal offenses above the Class B, either a Class A or Class B misdemeanor. These licensees have agreed to the proposed 10-year suspension contained in the petition that was sent to them. The executive director recommends the acceptance of the agreed suspension waivers for Phyllis Nixon and Cody Harper.
Commissioner Hollingsworth.
I move that the commission accept and adopt the recommendations of the executive director to enter a final agreed suspension waiver for Phyllis Nixon and Cody Harper.
Have a motion and a second. Is there questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Beecham.
Next, Commissioners, are 3 agreed suspension orders. As a refresher, previously, the Commission had authorized the Executive Director on the recommendation of staff to enter into, for final approval from you, agreed suspension orders in cases under which certain parameters, for instance, alcohol-related offenses, in which a rehabilitation program, continuing education, and a extended period of probation was part of the agreement. And as part of that agreement, during any period during the probation, if the licensee either failed to submit documentation with 90 days of the order, whether the licensee failed or committed any further violation of commission statute or rules during the extended period of probation, then the probation would be revoked and the licensee would be suspended for the remainder of the 10 years. So we haven't brought, staff and the executive director haven't brought any of these before you in a while, but you do have 3 of them before you today. The 4th, Mr. Walterscheid, we won't be presenting that, but Roy Jones, Stephen Nance, and Vanessa Orr. I'll present the first to you. Roy Jones, who received a driving while intoxicated conviction, a Class B conviction, submitted documentation at a SOA hearing. After the proposal for decision was issued, staff and the executive director reviewed the documents, reviewed the mitigating circumstances, and through this agreement proposed a fully backdated suspension with the suspension going forward for your review and your consideration.
Commissioner Hollingsworth.
So I move that the commission accept and adopt the recommendations of the executive director to enter agreed suspension order for Roy Jones, Stephen Nance, and Vanessa Orr.
Second.
Okay, have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Beecham.
Commissioners, next on your agenda are for information-only items. You'll see the number of statutory revocations, the number of statutory suspensions, permanent surrenders of license, reprimands for administrative violations, reprimands for failing to complete legislative required continuing education, and there's several pages of that, more pages of that, and those are for your information. And I would like to give a hand to Chris Veraday. This was her first commission meeting getting for us since she's coming over to Office of the General Counsel Enforcement. She's worn many hats in the last few weeks, but I want to say thank you very much, Chris. You've done a wonderful job.
Okay, we'll move to agenda item number 11, which is a public comment on any topic without action. I do have one person signed up, Mr. Ray Hunt. Stranger, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, I have 2 comments. The first one involves the memorial service that took place last month in May. As you probably know, in odd-numbered years, CLEAT has been doing a fine job in honoring the officers who have been killed the previous 2 years. TMPA has now come forward and said, we're not part of TMPA, but we had an officer who was killed in 2015, so we were part of the ceremony. TMPA came forward and said, we're going to do it in even-numbered years so that no family has to wait 2 years to have their loved one's name put on the wall. So we had that ceremony last month. I want to thank Chief Vickers for being out there with his staff, and also I want to thank 2 of the commissioners, I believe, that showed up, Commissioner Hester and Commissioner Hollingsworth. Thank y'all for coming out there on behalf of the Richard Martin family. I know they were appreciative to see y'all there. Also want to thank the Lieutenant Governor for speaking at that ceremony. The second thing I want to tell you is that on Christmas Day, 2011, Marine Lance Corporal Jesse Medina was in Afghanistan, and he was dealing with a IED, and it blew up in front of him. He ended up losing one leg and one of his fingers. He didn't even know he lost the finger until later because he was so focused on losing his leg. I am proud to say that this Marine Lance Corporal, who in my opinion is a hero, will be starting the Houston Police Academy on Monday with one leg and one prosthetic device. He passed all requirements to get in, all physical agility tests, including the 1.5 mile run, which I haven't passed yet, but he has. So I just want to thank the Houston Police Department for even considering this young man, because he has been a hero and will be a hero again. So on Monday, Jesse Medina will start the Houston Police Academy as a new hero. So thank you very much for y'all's time.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Ray. Man, that's good to hear those stories. The next agenda items is agenda item number 12, which is executive session to discuss pending litigation and personnel issues, including evaluation of the executive director, job performance pursuant to some sections of the Texas Government Code Open Meeting Act. And we are going to go in executive session, and I want to tell you right now, we will not be coming back into open session with any kind of additional action. So if you would, I ask everybody except for the executive staff of TCOL to leave the room, and we'll be in executive session for a short period of time. Thank you for your attendance today.